So Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the definitive edition, what a name, has now been out for more than a year. Developed by Grove Street Games, who is the same developer who made the mobile ports of the original games, which, other than San Andreas, were mostly done well, at least on release. So for this video, I'm going to go over what I think the definitive editions did well, what they tried to do but didn't do a great job of, and what they did poorly. For some of these, I'll go over what they were like at launch, and whether some issues were fixed properly or not, just so you have a good idea of why they were received so poorly. And lastly, I'll wrap up with my overall thoughts, whether you should buy these games, and what I think would have been better for these 3 games. Before we begin, if you enjoy GTA videos, specifically modding and tech explanation videos, consider checking out the channel. So, you've heard all the bad things about these games, but despite all the criticism, I do think Grove Street Games did some things well. I've seen a lot of people say modders have made the original games look better than the definitive editions, and in some aspects this is very true. But the truth is, Grove Street Games did a lot of things in the definitive editions that modders haven't done yet. For the most part, I'll only be listing the good things I found in the definitive editions that we haven't been able to replicate in the originals with mods. So, while the definitive editions have things like improved vehicle reflections over the original games, there is a ton of mods which implement different reflection methods to vehicles in the original games already. So I won't be listing things like that under what I think the definitive editions did well. First off, the lighting. The original games never had dynamic real-time lighting, not to this scale anyway. The entire 2D FX system from Renderware seems to have been replaced with new dynamic lighting from Unreal Engine. Lights in the definitive editions now actually light up areas in real time, instead of just character models and vehicles. In the original games, the light you see on the ground under lights is actually just a texture that changes colour based on the colour of the Corona sprite. You can easily replace this texture yourself in particle.txt. This solution isn't ideal, because if a light is next to a wall or anything, the wall won't appear lit up. The sprites in the original games usually have a point light attached to them, and this will light up character models and vehicles. But that's it, vehicle headlights and taillights basically function the same way in the original games. However, in the definitive editions, lights now dynamically light everything around them in real time, which looks much better. Not only that, but they also now cast dynamic shadows too. Headlights are especially impressive in the definitive edition. Each headlight can cast their own shadow, and it can look really good in some scenes. Another good thing about the definitive editions, which is also part of the new lighting system, is these games now have real-time dynamic shadows from the sun. GTA 3 and Vice City didn't have any actual shadows, only a generic shadow-like texture under vehicles and character models. San Andreas introduced stencil shadows and dynamic shadows, but they were very limited, with stencil shadows only appearing for generic map objects like lampposts and trees, and dynamic shadows only appearing for characters. I'd also like to note that basically no mod for the original games does anything like this. Some San Andreas mods have attempted to do something similar, such as RenderHook, but they're not nearly as polished as the definitive edition lighting, and it's only available for San Andreas, not GTA 3 or Vice City. RenderHook is still a fantastic project, but it's hard to compete with what the definitive edition is offering in terms of lighting, especially without the resources that Grove Street Games had. The real-time shadows in the definitive editions definitely look good, and like I showed earlier, the shadows that come from light sources do look fantastic. My only complaint about the shadows from the sun is that they update every few seconds rather than instantly, which makes the shadows jump quite a distance if you watch them closely. I haven't seen this since Skyrim on the PS3, and I'm surprised they couldn't make it update more often. Now, while the definitive editions butchered a lot of the game's assets due to using automated tools for almost everything, the few things that Grove Street Games seem to have done by hand is a big improvement over the original games. One of my favourite changes was the vegetation. All of the trees seem to have been replaced, and it's a big improvement, palm trees especially. A lot of the bushes in the game will also now move as the player walks through them. It's not the best effect, but it's something. Most of these models might be from GTA 5, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Vegetation is also now part of the LOD system, so trees can now be seen from much larger distances. There's a mod that does the same thing for the original San Andreas, but nothing like this for Vice City or GTA 3. How about the grass? GTA 3 and Vice City don't actually have any 3D grass. Instead, grassy areas just have a grass looking texture and will usually have bushes and trees placed on it. San Andreas introduced dynamic grass to the series. Depending on the material type of the model's collision, different types of grass will spawn when the player is near grassy areas. This grass will move slightly as if the wind is blowing it around. The draw distance of grass is very short, and it's also something that hasn't been changed by modders yet. However, the definitive editions add dynamic grass to all three games. It looks pretty good here in Vice City. The grass is much higher quality than the grass found in the original San Andreas, and it looks great. The draw distance for grass still isn't that high unfortunately, but it's not as low as the original San Andreas. Plus, the grass is placed in a lot of areas that's missing in the original San Andreas, and it even moves as the player walks through it. Not a perfect effect, but it's nice. Some small things which were improvements over the original games include things like wind effects on vegetation, so they gently blow around even outside of stormy weather. It's very subtle, but trees were static in the original games unless it was stormy. And yes, a mod has been made for San Andreas in the last few weeks which actually does something similar, and it looks fantastic. But it's not available for GTA 3 and Vice City, so I'm listing it in this video as an improvement. The definitive editions also include fake LOD traffic similar to GTA 4 and 5. This is basically vehicles which can be seen at a distance on roads. They're not actual vehicles though, it just gives the impression of traffic all over the map, even when the player isn't in that area. This can greatly improve how alive the world feels, and is again something that hasn't even been modded into the original games. The definitive editions also include a light pollution effect similar to the one seen in GTA 5. This is a very nice effect and makes the city seem a bit livelier at night time. Another small detail which I like is the addition of randomized pedestrian clothes. In the original games, pedestrian clothes were never random in any way, so you'd often see exact duplicates walking next to each other. In the definitive editions, the colours of the pedestrians' clothes can be random along with accessories, allowing for a combination of different looks for pedestrians. Fun fact, a system like this was first used in Vice City Stories. And maybe less of a small detail, but just something I approve of, is the art created for the definitive editions. Honestly, the pause menus for Vice City and San Andreas are way too bright, but the higher quality art for the definitive editions has been fantastic. I'm not sure if Grove Street Games do this themselves or if it's someone else, but it looks great. The definitive editions also have achievements, which is a nice plus. Although since the game as of now is only on the Rockstar Games launcher on PC, I doubt there's many people hunting them outside of console platforms. Lastly, the games do include a bunch of improvements that are possible on the original games with mods, but weren't previously available to console players. The UI is much higher quality with higher resolution fonts and icons, the radar has a nice 3D effect added, the radar now has GPS on all three games, GTA 3 now has an actual map in the pause menu, the controls are improved using a more modern control scheme, Movement, camera and aiming controls have been improved. This is especially nice for GTA 3 and Vice City, although it can feel a bit clunky on mouse and keyboard. I'm sure there's more I missed, but these are just some of the improvements the definitive editions provide by default that would usually require mods in the original games. The meh. These will be things Grove Street Games did that aren't necessarily terrible, but it would have been nice if they were done better. First off, the fake 3D interiors seen in Windows. Honestly, I love the idea, and this can work with a lot of the taller buildings in these games to make them look a bit more believable, but it was implemented poorly in the definitive editions. A lot of the fake interiors will often be repeated constantly in the same building, and they just look straight up bad. In a lot of instances, the fake generic interiors are also placed without any awareness of what the actual building is meant to be, and it won't make any sense. The guitar shop here is a prime example. In the original game, the texture of the shop contains guitars, but in the definitive edition, the fake 3D interior is just a generic interior like a lot of the other shops. Again, it can look like an improvement in some instances, like here, where the upper floors on this building can't really be seen. It gives the building a bit of depth and makes the building feel less like a block placed on the map and more like an actual building with an inside. I would have preferred if they only added this effect to taller buildings that you can't really see into that well. It still look nice and the lack of detail won't really matter. So next, the effects. Since the 2D FX system looks to have been replaced, they seem to have recreated a lot of the game's effects. For example, cars being on fire now look a lot better, and when an explosion happens, it will light up the area around it and the resulting fire will do the same. One thing I love about these new effects is things like smoke will actually be lit up by surrounding lights. Like here, the smoke from the vehicle is being lit up by the light next to it. It looks really good. However, it does come with issues. For example, lampposts have the wrong colour lights. I'm really surprised nobody ever complained about this, because the orange lamppost lights are iconic to places like LA, which Los Santos is based off of. The original games had orange lights on generic lampposts, but for some reason they're nearly white in the definitive editions. Another problem with the replacement of the 2D FX system is they didn't recreate some effects seen in the original games. For example, Ocean Drive in the original Vice City had clouds of coloured smoke all along it. It really helped the atmosphere and it looked fantastic. However, it's completely missing in the definitive editions. Coronas around weapon pickups in GTA 3 and Vice City are also missing. Instead, weapon pickups just have a light underneath them in the definitive edition. They added an option for volumetric clouds too in the definitive edition, which sounds good on paper, but when enabled, they make objects in front of them suffer from a ton of artifacts. So generally I disable this, but it's just another example of something they implemented that could have been done better than it was. Along with that, the clouds that were seen in the original San Andreas when flying really high are completely missing in the definitive editions. This is also likely due to the 2D FX system being removed and not being replaced fully. The character models. These things have been made into quite the meme, so I'm not actually sure if they remade or improved the original character models by hand or if they use some sort of automated tools, but some of them can look quite bad. Now, unlike most people, I actually like a lot of the new character models. A lot of people dislike the new Tommy model, but if you ask me, it's not bad. I feel like if a lot of these character models were created as a mod for the original games, they'd be heavily praised. Although this isn't a mod, so standards are higher. I will say, I do like some of the new material properties they added to characters. For example, the buttons on Ken Paul's short here, they have a glossy reflective look to them compared to the rest of his clothing. Improvements like this are nice. Although some materials on character clothing isn't very good. The biggest issue with the new character models is the animations, if you ask me. For example, the eyes are a lot clearer and more defined in these new models, but because they lack any sort of animation, they can look quite scary. The original games were mo-capped and animated with the original character models in mind. When you put higher quality models in their place, they can look fairly ridiculous due to the lack of animations in a lot of places, such as the eyes, like I said. From what we can see, it seems like they try to keep the character models in a somewhat similar style to the rest of the game's models, while improving the detail as much as they can. But with the poor animation data they had to work with, and the character models being viewed under the new lighting system, they can definitely look a bit cartoony at times. What about the map models and textures? I'll try to keep this short because you've likely heard about this by now. A lot of the models on the map were given increased poly counts using automatic tools. This can look good in some places, but it can cause things that were meant to have sharp edges to have rounder edges instead. For example, on release, the nuts here at this donut shop were round. This has been fixed since, but I'm sure there's more of these issues around the map. Again, the updates can look good in some instances, but it did bring some issues and it was quite lazily done. Some areas were redone by hand and they do look quite good. The shops in the Vice City Mall, for example, now have real 3D interiors and they're a big improvement over the basic window textures seen in the original game. They also added a lot of new light models to the maps. For example, a lot of houses will now have outdoor lights that didn't exist in the original games. This looks pretty good with the new lighting system. Some map models also have enhanced material properties, which in some instances can look quite good, such as glass windows looking more like glass and less like flat textures. What about the textures? A lot of the textures do look a lot better. I'm not sure if people remember, but the original games had some really low quality textures, which isn't surprising for the time. However, like a lot of the things they try to improve in this game, it does come with issues. It seems like they used a lot of AI upscaling to try to improve texture quality. Unfortunately, when you're working with textures that are very low detail to begin with, it can be hard for AI to figure out how to fill in the missing details. This resulted in a lot of honestly really reckless and lazy mistakes, such as text on textures being misspelled. Some textures which were upscaled just look awful and full of artifacts. While a lot of the misspellings have been fixed, there's still some out there even after the patches, like bear boxes instead of gear boxes. It's really not acceptable, especially when there's been several projects by the modding community that attempts to retexture the original games with higher quality textures. Rosa is a texture overhaul mod for San Andreas that keeps the style of the original game's textures but in higher quality, and the work from that mod is so much better than a lot of the textures seen in the Definitive Edition. So, the bad aspects of the Definitive Editions. People would have put things like the models, textures and characters into the bad section of this video, but I don't think they're as big of issues as they're made out to be. I will say though that they certainly didn't help the reception of the Definitive Editions, especially when people were paying a high price for it. So people had every right to be mad about those issues and the quality of the games. The first major mistake I think they made with this trilogy was bringing the game to the Unreal Engine. Now I know that's going to sound ridiculous considering the one thing I gave constant praise to was the lighting, which is only possible due to the Unreal Engine. I just don't think they did a good job with the implementation. The fact is, these games are still running on renderware deep down, but they threw a load of hacky plugins at Unreal, which allows it to interpret most of the original game's codebase and assets. You can clearly tell because the gameplay is basically the exact same aside from a few of the things they updated, such as aiming. Even bugs such as the sliding glitch works on the Definitive Editions. If they had rewritten the code, I highly doubt they'd manage to replicate the exact same feeling as the original games this well, Never mind the bugs that came with it too. They didn't rewrite the original code to make it native to Unreal. Instead, they just made Unreal read the original code. This caused a few problems. The major two, in my opinion, being the weather and performance. Now, I know it sounds stupid and you're probably saying, well, how did they mess up the weather? Well, basically, it seems like the time cycle system was the one thing that they did rewrite, as this was probably easier to rewrite because the old time cycle system wasn't built with the modern rendering techniques Unreal provides in mind. So they rewrote the time cycle system, and honestly, this completely killed the atmosphere of these games. With the original games, everything was designed around each other. The weather, the rendering techniques, and the assets. There was much tighter limitations for the original Rockstar team, and they designed the games around this. So with the new time cycle system that Grove Street Games implemented, several things were changed that altered the atmosphere significantly. The first is the colour tone. All three of the original games had very specific colour filters and effects that made them look very atmospheric, especially if you had the Trails effect enabled on GTA 3 and Vice City. The original colour tone is basically non-existent in the definitive editions, which, to be honest, I don't think some of the effects like the strong radiosity in San Andreas would mesh well with the new modern rendering techniques used in the definitive editions anyway, but the colour tone is something I'm sure they could have attempted to recreate, and they just didn't. That strong orange tone of San Andreas, which Rockstar also butchered in the PC release of San Andreas, just isn't there in the definitive editions. I think Vice City suffers the least from the colour tone changes, simply because of the way its map is designed, but GTA 3 and San Andreas look especially bland without them. Secondly, the lack of any fog just completely ruins San Andreas specifically. In the original San Andreas, the furthest the player can see without any mods is 1500 meters. This is only in the countryside or the desert, as only their weather settings have this draw distance. Los Santos weather only has a max draw distance of 800 meters, just as a comparison. The map of San Andreas is 6000 meters from edge to edge. So at most, if you were in the countryside or desert in the original game, you would only be able to see a quarter of the map. And this was both for optimization reasons and scale reasons. San Andreas is meant to be a big state featuring 3 cities. The draw distance helps make the game feel much bigger in scale than it actually is. Well, in the definitive editions, the map is basically visible all the time, so you can see one edge to the other from anywhere. What makes this even worse is they didn't include anything like atmospheric scattering or even a simple fog effect, so you can see all of the map's LODs from any distance, with nothing to hide their extremely low quality. They added an option for ground haze in a patch after people complained. This appears as you get high into the sky, but honestly this is an awful looking effect and it hardly even addresses the issue. You can still see Mount Chiliad from the ground of Grove Street, for example. Another issue is the variations in weather was also significantly reduced for San Andreas. Each major location in the original game had its own weather settings, and keep in mind, these weather settings alter everything from the sky colour, sun colour, ambient colour on models, draw distance, and so on. For example, Los Santos had 5 different weather presets called Extra Sunny LA, Sunny LA, Extra Sunny Smog LA, Sunny Smog LA, and Cloud LA, and these were obviously different to the weather settings for the other sections of the map. However, in the definitive edition, every city shares the same weather presets, except for the sandstorm, which will only happen in the desert. So the extra sunny weather in the definitive edition will be the same regardless of what location you're in. And lastly, the weather effects. You've all seen how dumb these look, especially the rain. The rain has been improved in updates since launch, and an issue was fixed where it wouldn't render over water correctly. But honestly, it still doesn't look great, and a better effect really should have been used here. Another weather effect that is absolutely awful is the sandstorm. Don't think I need to explain much here, you can see how ugly it is for yourself. So what about performance? Well, there's not much you can say here other than at release it was stupidly bad, and after some patches it improved a lot, but realistically it should be running a lot higher on platforms like the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Performance at release was just unacceptable, especially on console platforms. For example, the Xbox Series X version of GTA 3 had a performance mode which scales back graphics and resolution and is meant to run at 60 frames per second, yet it constantly dipped down to the 40 to 50 frames per second range. The Nintendo Switch version was much worse, scaling the graphics back massively and yet was still unable to hold a consistent 30 frames per second. I know the Nintendo Switch is a weaker console, but these games are very old and should be easily capable of running on hardware like the Switch. And like I said, this is still the RenderWare engine deep down, with what is basically some Unreal Engine graphical effects on top of it. The performance just isn't acceptable. I'll leave links to the performance reviews that Digital Foundry did on these games at release, so you can see for yourself what they released like. Now, it has improved since then, but I would argue it's still not acceptable. A console like the PS5 or Xbox Series X should be running games like these at 100 frames per second or more, but by hacking these games into Unreal, optimization becomes very difficult. If these games were rebuilt from the ground up instead of hacked together, they'd look much better than they do now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ran better. So, should you buy it? If you want to play these games and you can't play the originals on PC with mods, I would say the Definitive Editions are your second best option. The only version of the Definitive Edition I wouldn't recommend is the Switch version, as it looks really bad and the performance still isn't great. The Definitive Editions also have trophies and achievements, which might be ideal for some people who like to hunt for those. Just remember, the Definitive Edition has got issues, like the ones I've mentioned in this video, but it's not unplayable like a lot of the internet would have you believe. I wouldn't pay full price for the Definitive Edition however, but you can get it fairly cheap now on console for like €24, which isn't bad considering they contain 3 games worth of content. So what should have been done instead to bring the games to modern hardware? I see 2 routes Rockstar could have taken if they wanted to somehow bring these games to newer audiences. The first is, they could have copied or directly worked with modders on the original games and kept them on the RenderWare engine. The games would have had much higher quality textures, both the UI and map, they would have had widescreen support, newer consoles could easily run the original games at 4K resolution natively, a bunch of issues with the engine would be fixed, and they would have a new control scheme. I think this would have been the best solution to preserve these games and bring them to a modern audience, because as of right now, buying any of the original games on any modern platform will give you a less than great experience without modding. Basically, all console versions of the original games are outdated and have issues on modern hardware, as does the vanilla PC versions. And the vanilla PC versions also have visual downgrades compared to the original games on PS2, such as the PS2 color filter on San Andreas being missing on PC. There's no real way to just pick up and play any of the original games for most people. They all have issues on modern hardware, whether it's console or PC. The second option I think Rockstar could have possibly taken would have been a straight up remake of the original games. Literally get a full team of developers at Rockstar and just remake each game one by one. Start from scratch on the Rage engine, recreate assets to a modern standard, motion capture redone, recreate all the missions, and so on. The fact that the games would be remade would mean they could very likely get away with charging full price for them individually, and they could have released a remake of each game on the 20th anniversary of the original games if planned correctly. They could have even monetized the games further by introducing GTA Online to the 3D era with these new remakes. Not something I'm a fan of, but from the perspective of a company, it's not the worst idea. But they didn't do that. Instead, they merged the two ideas I just mentioned together. What we ended up getting was this weird thrown together mash of the original games with fancy, unoptimized modern rendering techniques thrown on top of it, resulting in poor performance and extremely inconsistent quality across the trilogy, which honestly just isn't acceptable for what is the biggest gaming series of all time. Just for some context, a game like Shadow of the Colossus, which doesn't even make it onto the Wikipedia page for the best-selling PS2 games, received a full remake back in 2018, not a remaster or a port, a remake, with all the assets created again from scratch. San Andreas, on the other hand, is the best-selling game of all time on PS2, and GTA 3 and Vice City are also in the top 10. Instead, these games received a weird hacked-together port to the Unreal Engine, with several things downgraded from the originals, and most of the assets altered poorly by AI or automatic tools. Yes, GTA games are arguably a lot bigger than Shadow of the Colossus, but this is the biggest gaming franchise ever. It just isn't acceptable from a company the size of Rockstar, and they're more than capable of completely recreating these games from scratch if they really cared. And speaking of Rockstar, do we blame them or Grove Street Games for the quality of the Definitive Edition? Honestly, a lot of people like to blame Grove Street Games for the poor quality of the Definitive Editions, and I guess that's kinda fair. They did develop them after all. But I think the blame mostly lies on Rockstar and Take-Two. Grove Street Games is only a small studio who haven't got much experience other than doing mobile ports. GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas are massive games. Don't be fooled by the fact that they're old and look outdated. They're still very complex games and they're by no means easy to work with. I have no idea what Rockstar and Take-Two were thinking hiring a small studio like Grove Street Games and expecting them to basically remaster 3 massive games for 9 different platforms in what was likely an unreasonable time frame. Despite my criticism of the hacky way they got these games into Unreal Engine, it still couldn't have been an easy feat, and honestly it's impressive that Grove Street Games even managed to do what they did. Rockstar and Take-Two decided to be cheap and spent the least amount of money as possible developing the Definitive Editions, and it clearly shows. So, a conclusion. The Definitive Edition isn't as bad as people say, but the biggest gaming franchise in existence deserved much better treatment from a much bigger team of developers. Rockstar and Take-Two cheaped out and paid a developer of mobile game ports to remaster 3 of the biggest PS2 games, both in complexity and popularity, and they got what they paid for. A hacked together, inconsistent mess that Rockstar then sold to fans for full price. What Grove Street Games managed to do was impressive, despite the way people criticised them. But clearly the project was too big for the studio to handle, which is Rockstar and Take-Two's fault more than anything. If you really want to play them and have no way to play the originals with mods, buy it on anything but the Switch. But don't pay full price, you can get it fairly cheap now anyway. And that's it. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoy GTA videos, specifically modding videos, be sure to check out the channel. If you like this video, give it a like. Thank you for watching and I'll catch you later.